I am Lindell Felix, National Executive Assistant, Administrative Services, assigned to JCI St. Kitts. And I will be your host for this evening. So tonight, I urge you to grasp all what you can through this panel discussion on the theme Trailblazers and Caretakers Celebrating Caribbean Women's Contribution and Health. Let me recognize the presence of International Vice President Cheryl Renform Sodom, President Marita Hyacinth, board officers, national councillors, senators, prospective members, panelists, moderator, persons viewing on the Zoom, on social media, and Vibian TV. Let us commence this evening's activity with a prayer followed by the JCI Creed. I now invite National Councillor Shauna Harris Joseph of JCI Dominica to do the invocation.
Good evening, everyone. Heavenly Father, on this day, International Women's Celebration, we thank you for JCI West Indies, University West Indies Global Campus, our panelists, guests, and listeners. We lift up our Caribbean women, honoring their resilience, wisdom, and invaluable contributions to our communities and beyond. We give thanks for the unwavering strength and the richness that they bring to our lives. May their health be protected and nurtured, and may they continue to thrive and lead in all aspects of life. Grant them the resources and support that they need to achieve their full potential, and may we all work together to create a world where every woman is valued, respected, and celebrated. We thank you, Heavenly Father. Amen.
Thank you very much, National Councillor Shauna. I will now ask National Councillor Therese Mills of JCI Antigua to recite the JCI Creed.
Thank you so much, Executive Assistant. Good night, everyone. I will now recite the JCI Creed. We believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life, that the brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nation, that economic justice can best be won by free men through free enterprise. The government should be of laws rather than of men. That Earth's great treasure lies in human personality, and that service to humanity is the best work of life.
Thank you very much, National Councillor Therese. I now ask National Councillor Wanika Ashton of JCI St. Vincent to say the mission, and Executive Assistant Laurel Jonas, Public Relations Officer, to say the vision.
Good evening, everyone. JCI mission to provide leadership developmental opportunities that empower young people to create positive change.
Good evening, everyone. JCI vision to be the foremost global network of young leaders.
Thank you so much, National Councillor Wanika and Executive Assistant Laurel. Right now, I invite our International Vice President Cheryl to give the welcome address.
Good evening, everyone present, National President, Board of Directors, and esteemed guests. My name is Cheryl Ren from Sordam, JCI Vice President for America, assigned to West Indies. Thank you for inviting me to be present at such a powerful panel that I know will be amazing this evening. Me, as a Caribbean woman as well, even though I'm in the cold, living in the cold, I really applaud this effort to discuss together, to support each other as women so that we can be indeed the trailblazers of our community. In this year, when we make a difference, let's do this not only within JCI, but also together with our friends, family, colleagues, everyone we see around us, help each other, support each other, and empower each other so that we can be the difference in our community. I wish you all a great evening, and I hope to see you all soon. Good evening.
Thank you very much, International Vice President Cheryl, and thanks for the welcoming words. We move swiftly into the program. I now invite our National President, Marita Hyacinth, to give the address.
Greetings, fellow JCs, and it's indeed an honor to extend a warm and welcome to each one of you on our call this evening, those who are on Zoom, those who are on YouTube, following with us on Vibian TV. Thank you for coming to our International Women's Day panel discussion. Tonight, we have with you an exemplary lineup of Caribbean women, from the host to our last speaker this evening. These are all great women, and we want to applaud them this evening. So we want to thank them for coming on today. Within JCI, we embrace a culture that values every individual, recognizing the unique contributions that each person brings. We believe in fostering an environment where diversity thrives, enabling us to create ideas and actions that resonate with the spirit of our organization. This is the mantra of JCI. This is the mantra of peace and unity. So JCI creates the opportunity for learning. It creates the opportunity for development. And JCI stands as a beacon for the promotion of a life dedicated to service. We firmly believe that the true value of service goes beyond monetary measures, and the impact that one of us or all of us on this call can make is immeasurable when rooted in the genuine intentions and sincere desires to contribute to the greater good. Let it be known that in our organization, JCI, gender holds no barriers to the lasting impact one can achieve. We champion equality, acknowledging that each individual, regardless of your color, gender, possesses the power to leave a mark on this world through their commitment to service. Furthermore, the Caribbean, in which with stories of women who have made lasting impacts, and it's our duty to ensure that these narratives are passed down to our younger generations by learning from the successes and the challenges faced by these trailblazing women. We can ensure that their impact lives on, inspiring future leaders to reach greater heights. This is what JCI intends to do this evening. So as we embark on this journey together, let us celebrate inclusivity inherent in our shared purpose, recognize the significance of learning and development, embrace the truth that genuine service and commitment to preserving and sharing our legacies of remarkable Caribbean women. Once again, thank you for joining us this exciting evening in JCI West Indies, and may our collective efforts bring about positive change and lasting impact. Good evening.
Thank you very much, National President Marita. We will move right along. I call on Executive Assistant Toya Lizon to introduce our moderator, Dr. Kimon Joseph.
Thank you, E.A. Lindell. All protocols observed. Dr. Kimon Joseph is head at UE Global Campus, Dominica. She holds undergraduate and graduate degrees in communication studies and a doctoral degree in higher education, leadership, and management. She is originally from the southeastern village of La Plaine in Dominica, but she has made her home in Cochrane, Rousseau Valley. We thank her for her service this afternoon, and I welcome Dr. Kimon Joseph.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here and to be the moderator for this evening's proceedings. Our panel discussion this evening is under the theme Trailblazers and Caretakers, Celebrating Caribbean Women's Contribution and Health. And participating in our panel discussion this evening, we have Dr. Tamika Peart, Professor Vereen Shepherd, Dr. Addis King, and Councillor Petal Benoit. I thank these women for their time and for their willingness to participate in our proceedings this evening. I'd like to wish all women everywhere across the Caribbean happy International Women's Day in advance. As we know, we are celebrating International Women's Day tomorrow. So my first order of business for this evening is to introduce our panel, and then I will tell you the order in which they will be presenting. This evening, we are joined by Dr. Tamika Peart, who is currently serving as an assistant professor, a senior policy advisor, a board chair, and director on key boards relating to development. Dr. Peart is also a valued member of the Jamaica Women's Political Caucus, an organization working towards promoting gender equality in political leadership within Jamaica. One of Dr. Peart's notable achievements is her instrumental role in revolutionizing the Jamaica state's response to gender-based violence through the Ministry of Gender. She has represented Jamaica at numerous international fora, conferences, meetings, study tours, and workshops, contributing to the global conversation on this issue. Moreover, Dr. Peart strongly believes in the power of gender as a vital lens in her professional life. She is deeply committed to inspiring and guiding young individuals, not only in Jamaica, but across the Caribbean and the world. We also have the privilege of having Professor Vereen Shepherd as one of our panelists this evening. Professor Vereen Shepherd is Professor Emerita of History and Gender Studies at the University of the West Indies. She is currently the chair of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Professor Shepherd is a consultant director of the Center for Reparations Research at the UWI, vice chair of the Caribbean Reparations Commission, and a member of the Jamaica National Council on Reparation. She's a published author and co-author, as well as editor and co-editor of several books and journal articles. She has received several awards, including the UWI Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Public Service, the Order of Distinction, Commander Class from the Government of Jamaica for her work in history and gender studies, and her public service. And she has also been blessed with the Africana Studies Distinguished Award from the Florida International University. Also presenting this evening as a panelist is Dr. Addis King. Dr. King started her healthcare career at the age of 18 at the then Princess Margaret Hospital in Dominica, now called the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, as a medical laboratory psychotechnologist. From 2007 to 2013, Dr. King worked as a medical doctor in various departments of the then Princess Margaret Hospital, and that includes in surgery, in internal medicine, in gynecology, in oncology, as well as in the accident and emergency department. For her commitment, she was awarded the most dedicated medical officer at the Princess Margaret Hospital in 2012. Dr. King is a consultant specialist in internal medicine and worked in that capacity at the Princess Margaret Hospital from 2016 to 2019. She was also part of the All Saints Medical School clinical faculty. She entered the political arena in 2019 and served as a member of parliament for the St. Joseph constituency in Dominica and the minister responsible for youth, social services, and gender affairs up until 2022. She's currently employed with the government of Dominica as the coordinator of the United Nations agencies and international non-governmental organizations. And being the superstar that she is, she also continues in her own private medical practice. Also presenting this evening is Councillor Petal Benoit. Petal Benoit is a seasoned chartered accountant with over 15 years experience in accounting, holding professional membership and qualifications from the Association of Chartered Accountants. She is a councillor in the Tobago House of Assembly. Beyond her professional pursuits, Petal is an entrepreneur who focuses on building a successful business in Tobago. Petal became she became a member of the Junior Chambers International in 2008 and has served in several positions on the board of directors at both the local and national organization. Petal is a wife and a mother of 2 boys. She is a cultural enthusiast and she enjoys folk and ballroom dancing and is also passionate about contributing meaningfully to the socioeconomic development of her island and the country by extension. So these, ladies and gentlemen, are our panelists for this evening. So we have Ms. Tamika Peart, we have Dr. Tamika Peart, excuse me. We have Professor Vereen Shepherd, Dr. Addis King, and Councillor Petal Benoit. Starting us off this evening on our general theme of trailblazers and caretakers, celebrating Caribbean women's contribution and health, is Dr. Tamika Peart. And her discussion will be an overview of the impact of public policy on health, focusing on women's contribution. Dr. Peart, we invite you now in your 10 minutes to give your presentation.
Hello, good evening. Thanks again, moderator. I must say that I wanted the task, or I wanted the privilege to be the first to wish all of the ladies here a very early, happy International Women's Day, but I stand with you in the sisterhood. We'll share it this evening. So I begin my panel discussion contribution, and so fellow panelists, Madam Moderator, online attendees from all over the Caribbean, good evening, one and all. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the JCI West Indies for their outstanding work in fostering the right attitude needed for young people to fuel change. I would also like to congratulate the management team for their remarkable efforts in keeping this ship steady. Today, we have gathered to discuss the remarkable contributions of Caribbean women at a very critical time in the Caribbean development. Caribbean women are leading in public policy for the betterment of society, no doubt, specifically in the field of health. My focus for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, it will be on women from various sectors or various parts of the Caribbean. I do not wish to focus only on the English-speaking part of the Caribbean, but I'll try as best to look at the French-speaking Caribbean, the Dutch-speaking Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, and the Spanish-speaking parts of the Caribbean. Please note that my list is by no means an exhaustive one. And we note here, in every sense of the word, that there are so many unsung heroes and heroines across the Caribbean who continue to positively impact society behind the scenes. And so my presentation is merely an overview that I hope I can squeeze within 10 minutes, as was echoed by the moderator earlier. Now, starting with the French-speaking Caribbean, women have played a pivotal role in shaping public policy relating to health. One such exceptional example would be that of Michelle Prévost-Madere, and by no means French is not a language I have mastered, so please bear with me. But Madere, by profession, a nutritionist and an advocate from Martinique, dedicated her career to addressing the health challenges faced by the people in her country. Now, through her expertise in nutrition and efforts to raise awareness about the importance of a healthy diet, she has significantly impacted the overall health and well-being of the community and communities in which she serves. Now, moving on to the Dutch-speaking Caribbean, we find some very inspiring examples, and one such is Dr. Virginia Asin. And she's Surinamese born. She's a physician, and she devoted her life to improving healthcare services, not only in Suriname, but across the wider Caribbean region. Now, as the director of Pan American Health Organization, Subregional Office of the Caribbean, Dr. Asin has been a strong advocate for evidence-based policies to combat non-communicable diseases in the region. Her contributions have had a substantial impact on preventing and managing non-communicable diseases, leading to improved health outcomes. Now, in the English-speaking Caribbean, we celebrate the influential women who are leading public health policy, shaping it in a very bold way. One such example is Dr. Joy St. John. And Dr. Joy St. John is a public health expert from Barbados who played a pivotal role in advancing health initiatives throughout the region. As the executive director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, Dr. St. John has prioritized tackling infectious diseases, strengthening health systems, and reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases. As a visionary leader and strategic planner, her work has resulted in a stronger public health infrastructure and improved health outcomes in not just her country, but in the English-speaking Caribbean. So turning our attention to the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, we also see women at the forefront shaping public health policies. And Dr. Sonia Copeman is one such example again, a fierce advocate for maternal and child health and well-being. A Puerto Rican by birth, she dedicated herself to improving the well-being of women and children, not just in her country, but also beyond the borders of her country. As the executive director of the Puerto Rican March of Dimes, Dr. Copeman has successfully implemented programs and policies which are aimed at reducing infant mortality, improving success to prenatal care, and promoting breastfeeding. Her work has had a significant impact on maternal and child health care outcomes in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one area where public policy has positively influenced women's health in the Caribbean is the reduction of maternal mortality rates. And this is something that we continue to celebrate, though we still have areas to fix. But nonetheless, we've had countries such as Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago that have implemented policies to improve access to quality prenatal care, skilled birth attendants, and emergency obstetric services. These efforts have led to a decline in maternal mortality rates, saving the lives of many women during childbirth. Furthermore, public policies aimed at promoting gender equality have had a substantial impact on women's health in the Caribbean. For example, various countries have implemented policies and legislations within the Caribbean region to address gender-based violence. And we look at the Domestic Violence Act in Barbados. We look at the Sexual Protection and Prevention Act 2021 in Jamaica. And we can also pull on the Domestic Violence Shelter Program that Jamaica has at a country level. Now, these policies and these legislation have undoubtedly provided women with protection and support resources, thereby enhancing their physical and mental well-being. It is important for us to note, however, that it is the women who are at the forefront of these advocacy movements to get these rights for women being reflected in policies and legislation. Now, another important example of public policy influencing women's health in the Caribbean is the enactment of laws and regulations related to sexual and reproductive health. Some states have passed legislations to safeguard women's rights, and these safeguards have undoubtedly enabled women to make more informed decisions about their reproductive health and to minimize their risks. Now, while women dominate in this space, I must use this opportunity to state that we acknowledge and appreciate the contributions of our male allies. However, challenges persist in the Caribbean, particularly regarding to, let me go back over that. Challenges persist in the Caribbean, particularly regarding access to contraceptives and family planning services. And there is also the conversation of, yes, we've gone to the limit of taking gender-based violence to reflect in policy and planning in a serious way, but then there are also some issues that are as a result of domestic violence that we still have areas to perfect where that is concerned. Now, many women in the region continue to face barriers that prevent them from accessing essential services, leading to unintended pregnancies and limited control over their bodies, and these lead to unintended pregnancies and limited control over their reproductive health. Additionally, we still continue to struggle with issues such as anemia. Anemia is a very simple matter, but is also complex. It affects mainly women of childbearing age and children under 6 years of age within the region. Interestingly, iron supplements still require a prescription for women to access them in many Caribbean states. They require a prescription to access them. And so let me use this opportunity to state that I'm in no way lobbying for iron supplements to become an over-the-counter supplement that we have access to, because there are a lot more complex matters that are at hand. But I'm using this opportunity to show you that public health, public policy relating to healthcare, it's a matter that brings real life implications in gendered ways for men and women within the region. So it becomes very critical for our public policies within the region to prioritize expanding access to affordable and comprehensive reproductive healthcare options to provide a better quality of life in a gendered way. Furthermore, we cannot have this discussion about an overview of the challenges and the successes of women's contribution to healthcare in public policy. And we don't look at how women are represented in health-related policy making and decision-making processes. This still remains an issue for us in the Caribbean, and it is essential to intensify our efforts to ensure the inclusion of women at all levels of public policy development and implementation is done in a most inclusive way. Women's organization and advocacy groups, they continue to play a vital role in this endeavor, providing expertise and insights in the specific needs and priorities for our women and girls in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, it is undeniable that women from diverse parts of the Caribbean region have made significant contribution to shaping the public health policies in their respective countries. Efforts to reduce maternal mortality rates, addressing gender-based violence, and safeguarding reproductive health have positively impacted women and their well-being. However, challenges remain, requiring greater access to comprehensive reproductive health services and increased representation of women in policymaking processes. Now, as we continue to or as we look to observing International Women's Day for this year, let us continue to support and empower our women. Let us continue to enable them to guide the trajectory of public health policies toward a healthier and brighter future for everyone in the Caribbean. To my sisters from the Caribbean region, I hope, well, I did say earlier that Dr. Joseph took the honor of me having the privilege to wish you all a very happy International Women's Day for the first. But we have the sisterhood, we'll share it. And so to the men here tonight, we're not going to leave you out of the conversation. A lot of the progress that we've made as women in the region, yes, it has been because of our own collective action, our self-mobilization as a constituency in the development of the region. But a lot of the progress that we have made also could not have been accomplished if men were not on our side. And so we are going to ask you to continue to be our allies in the development of the Caribbean where gender and inclusivity is concerned. My sisters, as I close this evening, it is imperative that I remind you all that it is a great time. It is a good time to be a woman in the life of the Caribbean region. But I want to challenge us all to know that in the future, we can have the best time for our girls and women to be women in the Caribbean region. And so this is my call for action for the generation that is to come. Let us use our personal action. Let us use our small spaces to get the ball rolling. We can have an inclusive society. We can have an inclusive Caribbean region. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll be listening to the rest of my colleagues, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peart, for your contribution to our discussion tonight. Our next presenter is Professor Vereen Shepherd. She will be presenting on the topic, Historical Context of Women's Resistance and Their Role in Health and Reparations. Good evening, Dr. Shepherd.
Good evening to everybody. In fact, greetings, everyone, and a special greeting to the people of Waitukubuli. Thanks to the JCI for inviting me to be part of this conversation during Women's History Month. And my focus will be on enslaved women in the Caribbean, women we often forget. And my main approach to this is that slavery threatened. Slavery, chattel enslavement was a threat to women's health. Health provisions were minimal during the period of enslavement, and the brutality of chattel enslavement undermined any small efforts that were made to improve women's lives. It is fitting to have this conversation in an island whose name in the Kalinago language means tall is her body. And you may not, but I interpret that to mean an age-long consciousness of women's importance in Dominica. Now, demographic data reveal that women represented approximately 25 to 30% of the estimated 15 million Africans forcefully transported to the Caribbean via the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans that lasted from the 15th to the 19th centuries. Enslaved women served an essential ideological function, enslavers appropriating their reproductive lives by claiming their children as property, who eventually performed unwaged labor from age 4. And they used their skin color as justification for making them reproduce the status of enslavement, unlike white women who could only reproduce free status, even if black men fathered their children. Enslaved women were the backbone of the labor force, and their exploitation and dehumanization were central to Europe's enrichment. Given the forms of control and exploitation or sexploitation, enslaved women resisted their enslavement. As Harriet Jacobs said, and I quote, "My master had power and law on his side. I had a determined will. There is might in each." The gradualism of Wilberforce and his parliamentary colleagues was rejected by enslaved women who took a radical approach to anti-slavery. Now, I know that when the topic of resistance comes up, we think about women like Queen Nanny of Jamaica, Nanny, Joan, Betty, and Sarah of Antigua, Carlotta of Cuba, Charlotte and Angelique of Dominica, Betta Douglas of St. Kitts Nevis, among others, who engage in marriage. We also think about those who disrupted plantation management, like Juanica of Jamaica, who typified resistance via day-to-day acts of plantation disruption, and Cecile Fatima of Haiti, Adelaide Disson of Trinidad and Tobago, Nanny Grigg of Barbados, Catherine Brown and James, Eliza and Jane Whittingham of Jamaica, Amber of Guyana, who participated in wars of resistance to end slavery, and so many more resistors. And we must honor them in this Women's History Month. But there is quite a body of historical data on other aspects of resistance, going back to the work of the pioneer of women's history, Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and continuing in the works of Jennifer Morgan in Laboring Women and others, which show that resistance was also related to gendered occupations. Indeed, the work demands placed on the laboring population shaped enslaved women's demographic experiences during the 18th century, and such demands affected mortality and fertility rates across the Caribbean. For example, only women were nursemaids and midwives, and the accusations of infanticide were directed solely at them. Gender made it possible for women to restrict fertility and control reproduction through abortions and other means. Richard Dunn highlighted the low and seasonal nature of one estate's fertility rate, from which, according to him, the impact of the sugar labor system upon mothers can be inferred, end of quote. The likelihood of an infant surviving birth during crop time was relatively low. As field laborers and as domestics and concubines, women's bodies then became the site of power contestation. In addition to the work regime that made resistance inevitable, rape was rampant, and what some call gynecological resistance was a feature of chattel enslavement. The prevalence of sexual violence under chattel enslavement is illustrated in this statement by Robert Wedderburn, a free mixed-race man in Jamaica. My father's house was full of female slaves, all objects of his lust, among whom he strutted like Solomon in his grand seraglio, or like a bantam cock upon his own dunghill. By him, my mother Rosanna was made the object of his brutal lust. You have heard of Thomas Thistlewood, who owned and managed properties in Western Jamaica and left daily journals of his abuse of enslaved women. And he's perhaps the most documented example of what today we would call a rapist or sexual predator. Such sexual violence, which typified the experiences of countless enslaved and free women, drove some to engage in abortive methods to avoid bringing the result of rape to full term. Indeed, when both Britain and the United States banned the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved peoples in 1807, 1808, cutting off the sources of African captives, enslavers began to bank their future increasingly on the fertility of enslaved women. Medical journals and planter records in the British Caribbean and the United States reveal growing attention paid by white physicians to enslaved women's reproductive lives. Of course, it was enslaved midwives and nurses who supplied much of the daily plantation health care. The question is, why did infant mortality in plantation settings remain high, even though attention to pregnant women's health care increased in the quest to ensure babies were carried to full term and that infants were nourished to increase survival? In the Caribbean, laws were even passed to ban the flogging of women, lest that endangered their unborn children. To ensure live births, planters in the 18th century introduced incentives, giving women extra days off and exempting them from plantation labor, especially already pregnant women and nursing mothers. The more children enslaved women had, the greater were the incentives. Because abortions were difficult to monitor, planters were convinced that the key to live births rested with midwives. Before leaving Sonderman in 1775, for example, one Stanislas Fauche, owner of the Fauche sugar plantation, instructed his overseer to put pregnant women in the hands of midwives when they were approaching their terms. Both mother and midwife were to be compensated with money and fabric when the child was out of danger and whipped if it died. The mother was also to be put in iron collars until such time as she became pregnant again. So he also directed that all female enslaved persons who were expecting must, if they wish to avoid punishment, declare it to the midwife, who must then report to the surgeon to have it registered. And there are so many other examples of that. Some sources suggest that infanticide was a very rare action taken by mothers, in part because enslavers might have mistaken infanticide for other forms of infant death, and also because women who took their own children's lives would have faced severe punishment, even death, for committing these acts. Planters believed that women who aborted made a conscious choice not to reproduce, and that when they did give birth, they, along with the midwives, killed the infants in the first few days of life. As mentioned before from the work of Bernard Moit in More Than Chattel, some gender-specific aspects of plantation labor provided women with unique ways to resist slavery. For example, only women were nursemaids and midwives, and accusations of infanticide were directed solely at them, and they were punished for such acts. Enslaved women suspected of self-induced abortions, a common practice, as I said, were put in iron collars. Despite the attempts to improve the health of pregnant women, why did infant mortality still remain high? Sources indicate that in the US South, for example, an estimated 50% of enslaved infants were stillborn. Now, resistance has been attached to infant mortality under slavery because, in other words, that has been given as a high, a foremost reason for this situation in the Caribbean and elsewhere in the US South. And so resistance has been attached to infant mortality under slavery because the responsibility that was placed on enslaved women and midwives to sustain the labor force after 1807 was not supported by many women. From avoiding sexual intercourse to terminating pregnancy to taking the lives of their own infants, some women resisted slavery by working to control their participation in producing more enslaved children. Their acts of reproductive resistance endangered their health as they used indigenous methods to carry out acts of infanticide. So this form of resistance was traumatic for women. Infanticide, some authors say, speaks to slavery's horrific violence, pain, and trauma. And while we talk about it as a form of resistance that operated within the system, rather than by leaving it, along with suicide, infanticide conveys that some enslaved people tragically saw death as the only escape from bondage. They simply saw no future from enduring it. Overall, then, we must, in this Women's History Month, recall the pain of our female ancestors as they negotiated a life of misery and made choices that brought such pain to their existence and at times resulted in their own deaths. And we must never forget these 1845 words of Frederick Douglass, because it is indeed true that, and I quote, "When the true history of the anti-slavery cause shall be written, women will occupy a large space in its pages, for the cause of the slave is peculiarly women's cause." Colonialism, then, to conclude, was experienced in specific ways by women in the Caribbean, whether indigenous, enslaved, or indentured. European nations have a case to answer with respect of the harm done to the ancestors of the women of the region and the continuing legacy. No justification for reparation can be compiled without including the lived experiences of the ancestors of Caribbean women who experienced terror under colonialism, at times at the hands of enslaved women. Women's independent economic power and contribution to the development of European industry must not be underestimated or trivialized, and this contribution must feature in the reparation demand. It was Elsa Gavaya, that phenomenal historian from Guyana, who reminded us that, and I quote as I end, there is much to be learned from the experiences of those who centered what ought to have been seen as universal tenets of liberty and equality, and raised the fundamental question then as to whether the rights of human beings should be recognized and respected in the Caribbean. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Shepherd, for your contribution to our discussion this evening. In the question and answer round, I'm sure we'll have quite a bit of questions for you based on your presentation and your own experiences. Our next speaker is Dr. Addis King, and her contribution will be based on direct contributions of women in the health sector and current health initiatives that are led by women. I now invite Dr. Addis King to have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Please allow me to recognize in our presence the International Vice President, Cheryl, our National President of JCI West Indies, Merita, all our board members of West Indies, of JCI West Indies, our national councils across the West Indies. And I would especially like to welcome, I see that our Minister of Dominica, Honorable Melissa Scarrett, is right here with us, and I'm happy to have you with us. She is the Minister for Housing and Urban. She's also the director of the Melissa Scarrett Foundation. So thank you for joining us tonight. Kimon, so happy to be here with you and the other members of our panel. And tonight, as we celebrate International Women's Day, as we celebrate our women across the Caribbean, I couldn't stick to the thing of just celebrating women. We are celebrating women, but I would love to celebrate more women because, and this is why I will be talking about strategies for healthy Caribbean women tonight. And I will be talking about one woman in particular who left us recently, who has impacted health across the Caribbean and Latin America. So tonight, I want to say thank you for having me, JCI, and I want to congratulate the JCI West Indies Board for such an impactful meeting at that time. And it is so important because I was listening to the history of JCI, and apparently when JCI commenced, it was only a men's organization. So you can see within this institution how much that we have accomplished in gender equality, because we now have, for example, at the head of our West Indies organization, a woman from my own country, Dominica, that I'm very proud of. So thank you for having me tonight. And tonight I want to talk to you, our women. I want to tell them how important it is to have a healthy lifestyle and how as women we can forge that. We listen to the news every day and we continue hearing about non-communicable diseases. We hear about our young people dying. We have things like heart attacks that no longer is an old people's disease. You hear a 28-year-old, a 32-year-old dying from a heart attack. And this it's just something that is very, very troubling to me, especially as a medical doctor. So women, tonight, let's talk health. Let's talk how can we remain healthy. And we all start with a balanced diet. A balanced diet, and I'm not by no means telling people to deprive themselves from the nice things that they like, but we as Caribbean women, we like to stick to one food group. For some strange reason, we like carbohydrates. We want to eat our rice, our pasta, and then we pay little attention to our proteins like our meats, our peas, and even less attention to our vegetables and fruits. And to tell you the truth, we need to stop that because people are dying. And I mean, I was just looking at the statistics. We are very bad at data in the Caribbean, but our statistics for NCDs in 2016 is 76.8% of total deaths. People are dying, and 76.8% of our people are dying from non-communicable diseases. And I am here to tell you tonight that we can put an end to this. we can eat better. We can have balanced diets. Fruits and vegetables are our friend. We live in a region where we can plant our own food and we can literally eat what we grow. And we can literally grow what we eat. We have backyards. We don't live in the areas where we live in apartments and there's no yard for anything. We have a backyard, and backyard gardening, greenhouse agriculture, that's something as women we can take on because we want to be healthy women. We can walk. The Caribbean is one of the safest areas. And how you turn around, you see botanical gardens, you see parks all across the Caribbean. We can walk. We can literally have an active lifestyle, and we can do that so that we can be healthier. We can also, one of the biggest issues that we have within the Caribbean is that we tend to internalize things. Stress and mental health. Stress and mental health has been an issue for Caribbean women for way too long now. We need to totally find ways to ease our stress. It goes back to an active lifestyle. We should not be taking the elevators every day. We can walk up the steps. We do not have to take the car right next to where we are going. We can walk to our destination. There's nothing wrong with parking out of town and taking a walk around town. Little activities, little actions that we can actually take. And this is saving our lives. And as women, if we do it, we encourage our children, we encourage our friends, we encourage our spouses. We are able to do it very well. So this is why, as we celebrate International Women's Day, I am calling on all our women to be that voice for women in promoting a healthy lifestyle. And these crash diets don't work. A healthy lifestyle where you eat healthy all the time so you can reward yourself with the piece of cake that we like so much. We need to do better as a Caribbean. And I know we like rum, and I'm going to say it that way. We love rum. As Caribbean people, we love rum. And before, historically, it was a men's thing to go and sit in the bars and have alcohol beverages. But as women, more and more, we like our alcoholic beverages, but everything in moderation. We need to reduce the amount of alcohol we take, and we need to do it now. It is quite alarming to see the number of patients that are admitted to hospital with liver issues every year as a result of the high intake of alcoholic beverages. And we see it in different stages. We have, sometimes we have the alcoholic fatty liver diseases that people present with, but we've seen people with liver cirrhosis, even cancer of the liver, and it started with too much alcohol. So if we want to be healthy as women, we have to reduce the intake of our alcohol. Smoking. I remember growing up, seeing a cigarette in a woman's hand was not heard of. I know there are some of our grandparents who used to smoke their pipe, their tobacco pipe, but that was a once in a while thing. But right now you go everywhere and women are smoking. We need to put an end to that. We need to educate our population that smoking in any of its forms is just not good. And I don't care what people have to say about, oh, there are benefits to certain herbs, but smoking in any form is not good. That smoke goes straight to your lungs and it causes harm. People are dying in this day age of cancer of the lungs, and that most of it, 90% of people with cancer of the lung were smokers, and the rest of them were exposed to smoking. Either their spouse smoked, their friends smoked, and they hung around, and they did not take their time to realize that they were being harmed by the smoke. As Caribbean women, we need to encourage ourselves and our women friends Well, the men as well. I'm no way going to stay away, but we need to encourage our people to stop smoking, because smoking is bad for your health. And I don't care what you're smoking, it's bad for your health. And the hard drugs, it's bad for your health. So we need to see more of our women. We need to hear our voices around health issues. There are some out there talking about it, but we need to hear more of it. And on International Women's Day, as we celebrate women, let us not talk only of our positive achievement, but the negative things that we would like to see change. Okay. NCDs in the Caribbean is very alarming. And it is secondary to our bad diets. And we in the Caribbean don't do it bad, although they might say in other countries that our diets, their diets are bad. But the difference in the Caribbean is that we can eat better. So tonight, I want to tell everybody it's time to stop it. But before I finish, and I realize that time is going, I really want to make special mention of our champion for the ending of non-communicable diseases, and that is Dr. Carissa Etienne. Dominican by birth. Carissa was headed PAO for quite a bit, and before that, she worked well in Dominica. She was a champion for our public health here in Dominica, and I think under her directions and under her leadership, we were able to accomplish so much within the health, especially at primary healthcare level. She was one who promoted health for every Dominican, and it was with great pride that we Dominicans saw her move into the Caribbean region, the Latin American region, and worked just as hard. She helped the governments within most of these countries to form policies in order to fight our non-communicable diseases. And it is with pure sadness that we had to say goodbye to her last December. But I want everyone to know that we are very proud as Caribbean people, as Dominican, to have had her at the leadership of such a prestigious organization, which is PAHO. And we appreciate her work, not only in help promoting women's health, and also in promoting health across the Caribbean. Before I leave, I want to also encourage our women here to have their pap smear done. Two of the main cancers that we see among our women is the breast cancer and cervical cancer. Can be prevented. The cervical cancer can be prevented by having regular pap smears. So I would like to encourage everyone to get their pap smears done tomorrow, International Women's Day. And also, while you're in the shower tonight, I would love you to palpate your breast, look for changes. And if you see any changes, see your doctor. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I do hope that we have a very good discussion going ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Dr. Addis King. Our final panelist for this evening is Councillor Petal Benoit. And her topic is Political Dimensions of Caribbean Women's Contributions, Balancing Political Life and Service Organizations. I invite Mrs. Benoit to give her presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Permit me to recognize our International Vice President, our National President, National Board Officers, National Councillors, past Presidents, Senators, my fellow panelists, and members of our esteemed audience. A pleasant good evening, and thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion as we celebrate women in the Caribbean. Today, I am honored to be a part of this forum as we celebrate Caribbean women and discuss the critical role of Caribbean women in shaping the political landscape of the region. This evening, I will draw from insightful reports and research by the UN Women and other related agencies. So let's delve into the remarkable contributions of Caribbean women in politics. And Caribbean women have long been catalysts for change driving progress, and advocating for social justice. On average, 22% of ministerial portfolios, cabinet positions in the Caribbean are held by women. Across the region, women in elected positions is generally below 30%, with the exception of Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. And in the case of Guyana, they have legislation that requires a quota of 1/3 of the number of political parties nominees must be a woman. So despite facing systemic barriers, and gender-based discrimination, we have made significant strides in political leadership and participation. Throughout history, Caribbean women have played pivotal roles in political movements, from the fight against colonialism to the struggle for independence and beyond. They have mobilized communities, challenged oppression, and championed the rights of marginalized groups. If we consider advocacy and gender equality, Caribbean women have been at the forefront of advocacy efforts to advance gender equality and women's rights. They have pushed for legislative reforms, policies, and programs to advance gender-based violence, economic empowerment, and political participation. Beyond politics, Caribbean women are deeply engaged in grassroots activism and community organizations. They lead initiatives to address social issues, promote civic participation, and empower marginalized communities. Today, Caribbean women continue to break barriers and reshape political dynamics in the region. The representation of women in Caribbean parliaments has steadily increased over the years. However, there is still much work to be done to achieve gender parity and ensure that women's voices are fully heard and represented. At this time, I want to take the opportunity to identify key contributions of female politicians in the region. And Caribbean women have ascended to prominent political positions, including prime ministers, cabinet ministers, and members of parliament. Women, we bring unique perspectives, experiences, and leadership, enriching political discourse and driving positive change. First, I want to point out the contributions of former Prime Minister Eugenia Charles of Dominica. And she was the first female Prime Minister of Dominica and the Caribbean region. She served as Prime Minister from 1980 to 1995. She was known as the Iron Lady of the Caribbean. Charles played a pivotal role in shaping Dominica's political landscape. She focused on economic development, strengthening democratic institutions, and promoting regional integration. Charles also advocated for human rights and social justice, both domestically and internationally. I also want to recognize the contributions of Portia Simpson Miller, and she served as the first female Prime Minister of Jamaica from 2006 to 2007, and again from 2012 to 2016. She is known for her advocacy for women's rights and gender equality. During her tenure as Prime Minister, she implemented policies aimed at reducing poverty, improving education, and promoting social inclusion. Simpson Miller also played a key role in advancing Jamaica's international relations, particularly within the Caribbean community, CARICOM. Mia Motley is another trailblazer. and she became the first female Prime Minister of Barbados in 2008. She has been a trailblazer in the politics of Barbados, leading the country through significant economic and social reforms. She has prioritized sustainable development, climate change, and renewable energy initiatives. Motley's leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic garnered international recognition for her effective crisis management and transparent communication. Kamala Persad-Bissessor of Trinidad and Tobago. She served as the first female Prime Minister from 2010 to 2015, and she is known for her commitment to social justice and inclusive governance. During her tenure, she implemented reforms to improve healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Persad-Bissessor also prioritized environmental conservation and renewable energy initiatives, advocating for sustainable development in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have Jennifer Smith of Bermuda, and she was the first female premier of Bermuda, serving from 1998 to 2003. And she played a significant role in advancing Bermuda's social and economic development. She focused on expanding access to education, healthcare, and affordable housing. Smith also promoted diversity and inclusion, advocating for the rights of marginalized communities and fostering dialogue on racial reconciliation and equality. These Caribbean women in politics have made indelible contributions to their respective countries and the wider region, leaving a lasting legacy of leadership, advocacy, and social change. Their achievement serves as inspiration for future generations of women leaders and demonstrate the transformative power of women in politics. Despite the contributions of Caribbean women, we face numerous challenges in the political arena, including entrenched norms, limited access to resources, and gender-based violence. However, these challenges also present opportunities for collaboration, solidarity, and collective action to dismantle barriers and create more inclusive political systems. As we reflect on the political dimensions of Caribbean women's contributions, it is imperative that we take concrete actions to support and amplify our voices. These include implementing gender-sensitive policies and legislation, investing in leadership development and capacity building for women, promoting inclusive political processes and decision-making mechanisms, combating gender-based violence and discrimination, recognizing and celebrating the achievements of Caribbean women in politics. And this list, of course, is not exhaustive. Caribbean women are catalysts for change, driving progress and shaping the future of the region. By recognizing their contributions, and of course, the list of women that I would have identified before is not an exhaustive list, because we have women throughout the Caribbean in playing significant roles in leadership in the politics. So by recognizing the contributions of women in politics, addressing systemic barriers, and fostering inclusive political environments, we can build a more just, equitable, and democratic Caribbean for all. So in conclusion, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present on the dimensions of Caribbean women in politics. And I want to advocate and urge us all, let us work together to empower Caribbean women and advance gender equality in our societies. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Benoit. I'm so grateful for the contributions of all our panelists this evening. We have listened to Dr. Tamika Peart on the overview of the impact of public policy on health, focusing on women's contributions. We have also heard from Professor Vereen Shepherd, who spoke on the historical context of women's resistance and their role in health and reparations. Thirdly, we heard from Dr. Addis King, who spoke on direct contributions of women in the health sector and current health initiatives led by women. And then we heard from Councillor Petal Benoit, who spoke on political dimensions of Caribbean women's contribution, balancing political life and service organizations. And now I'd like to ask the women some questions. After that, I will then give way to members of the audience who have questions of their own that they would like to ask, and I'll be assisted this evening in that by Ms. Merita Hyacinth. So my first question is for Dr. Tamika Peart. And my question is, what are the major barriers you think to incorporating gender-sensitive approaches in policy making in the Caribbean? And how do you think we can overcome that? What do you think are major barriers to incorporating gender-sensitive approaches in policy making in the Caribbean? And how do you think we can overcome that? Dr. Peart?
All right, thanks much again, Dr. Joseph, and excellent question there as it relates to just the ongoing barriers we have in incorporating gender sensitivity in the policymaking process in the Caribbean. I want to start off my response to that question in saying that it's not a yes and no. It's not a if we do this, we will win. And so if we have done this and we have not seen all of the results that we would have wanted, it doesn't mean that we would have lost, because it's not a win all or lose all. But a major barrier for me at this point, it concerns how we collaborate across the region, in the states itself, how we work together across ministries, across departments, across agencies, and then moving from the state level, how do the internal side of the state level, how do we work as countries together on the whole matter of gender equality? So the whole matter of collaboration on gender and how we get all of our stakeholders on one accord, all of our stakeholders to know when we can have concessions, when we can have trade-offs for the greater good. That continues to be a challenge, another challenge for us in terms of putting gender lenses into our policymaking process in the Caribbean concerns data and how much we have access to, I don't want to say good data, but it is what it is, data to inform us on how we can really look at including women in a very multi-layered way. We recently would have seen some countries getting the support from our international development partners on the economic cost of violence against women. And we within the sector working, we knew that these were some of the costs, but we never had that data before that directly spoke to how and how this impacts the budget in a direct way. We knew it working in the space, but for the rest of the country, when we talk about domestic violence, it still seemed like it was something that is isolated from the rest of the country. That data really helped us to pivot to the rest of the country, pivot to the rest of the Caribbean, pivot to our other stakeholders in private sector that we would have wanted to come on board. So the second part for me concerns getting the data, getting the political will from the powers that be to pump money into securing data for us to continuously respond and understand the multi-layered issues concerning domestic violence. And then there is always the issue of how we engage men and boys. I've always said it that yes, we want equality as women, but we cannot do it without our allies in development. And so I know that in the case of Jamaica, we actively work with our men and boys through the male desk that the Bureau of Gender Affairs has. But I would want to see us taking it from that standpoint to something that is a regional movement, so to speak. It does exist, but not in the collective way that we would want to see it. How do we get our men involved in a strategic but not a divisive way? I find that once we engage men, the discussion it goes into why men are getting this, why women are getting that. No, we are saying gender benefits everybody as an important tool for the development of our country. So to summarize all of what I've said, collaboration, accessing good data, and how we engage our men and boys. I could go on, but I'm going to limit it to those three.
Thank you very much. My next question is for Professor Vereen Shepherd. I'd like to know, how do you think the historical contributions of women in the Caribbean can better be recognized and integrated into the current narrative of reparations? How do you think the historical contributions of women in the Caribbean can be better recognized and integrated into the current narrative of reparations?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. And I want to say, first of all, that this story is not really dismal where that is concerned, because there have already been steps to integrate gender and women's contributions into the reparation movement. But I think that more can be done because, as you know, Caribbean history is not a compulsory subject, as far as I know, beyond the grade 7 level in high schools. If it's different in your country, I'll be happy to hear that. So whereas the reparation advocates and campaigners have already made steps toward incorporating this narrative into the reparation movement, we need to pass this on to our young people, our children, and that can only be done in the schools. The Center for Reparation Research has published an overview of reparation in which gender is a part of the narrative. It's called Introduction to Reparation for Secondary Schools, and I recommend it to you. So it was published by the University of the West Indies Press, so it's available. And we actually introduced some in Dominica a few months ago, as well as in Trinidad and Tobago and the Bahamas. And we will be going to other countries in the region. But we have to get this narrative into the Teachers College and the schools, and we have to develop textbooks. But something else that we can do is to ensure that we engage in what I call symbolic decolonization. So whereas we're trying to decolonize the curriculum and have that in schools and redo the textbooks and so on, correct the language and all of that, we also have to engage in this symbolic decolonization. Look at around the region on our landscape. Do we see women heroes on our landscape? During this Women's History Month, for example, where can you go in your respective countries to pay respects to women? In Jamaica, we're still lobbying to replace Queen Victoria in a park that is called St. William Grand Park with a woman who was a was very instrumental in the labor movement. So whereas we are talking and we're calling names from time to time in certain fora, we don't have these women on our landscape. We also have parks, which are called Victoria Park across the region, and roads and buildings. Some of us have a Columbus, and not the heroes that I called and the heroines whose names I called this evening. And so we have to do that. And we also have to ensure that our reparation committees are balanced by gender. Some of them are not, and we need to look to that. And finally, we have to insist when we go and listen to reparation lectures. If women are absent, the audience needs to hold the speaker to account. So those are just some of the ways in which I think we can do that. But as I said, it's not all hopeless because we have already been doing that. We have been calling on women politicians, for example, to carry the narrative if they say they support reparation.
Very good. And these all seem very practical indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Shepherd. Dr. Peart, you wanted to make a contribution. I see that your hand is raised.
Yes. Going back, I'm just adding to a fourth point. I wanted to limit it to 3, but when Prof was giving her response, it prompted something in my mind that I would cry tonight if I did not say it. But one of the barriers for us in the Caribbean concerns the institutional capacity we have at a state level for gender equality and infusing gender across the board. My call to action and my to-do list tonight for all of us here from different parts of the Caribbean. I dare you to look at your budget to see the percentage of your budget that goes towards gender. And when you look and you see the percentage of your budget that goes to gender, compare it with the expectations you have for what your government is to achieve, your civil servants are to achieve when it comes on to doing the business of gender. Doing gender is just like any other kind of policy making. It takes cash to care. So I had to say that.
Indeed, it does take cash to care. Thank you very much, Dr. Peart. I have a question now for Dr. Addis King. And my question to you, Dr. King, is what are some of the groundbreaking contributions of Caribbean women in the health sector that you believe that should be highlighted? What are some of the groundbreaking contributions of Caribbean women in the health sector that you believe should be highlighted?
Thank you very much, Kimon, for this question. I must say that when you talk about the healthcare system, the first thing you must say that historically, it has been a men's field. And so you would hear, whenever somebody hear doctor and it's a medical doctor, they tend to think it's a man. So what has women done? The mere fact that so many women have decided to go into health has really break that barrier that gives it that men's thing. I'll give you an example, Kimon, and that's a very good example I always give. I remember being on duty at the accident and emergency room one night. And then I came to a patient and I examined him, gave him instructions. And then he said to me, "But nurse, the doctor said," and I will tell you, I always, when I go to patients, I always introduce myself. But he, at this moment, is so accustomed to a man being, because I had a male nurse working with me that night. So he decided in his mind that I was the nurse and I was the doctor. So women have shown that we can be part of a health team and we can be better parts of it. And some of the contributions they would have done is a lot of women going into research. So now a greater percentage of women into research. So they've been adding to the evidence-based medicine. That is really what is upheld in this day and age. Is no longer go take this or go to that, and nobody can explain why. There's evidence based in everything that anybody does within the health field. So we have women leading in that area. And I'm excited. And even I will talk about Dr. Etienne again. Dr. Etienne in Dominica was able to revolutionize our primary health care. She was able to do that at a time when we thought that it was a men-dominated field in medicine. But she headed our primary health care as director, and our NCDs dropped in these times. I had people like my grandmother telling me she's going to exercise. The lady was over 60, and she used to walk all the way to Hillsborough Estate because she had to exercise. And that was the kind of education that was given at community level. And we had things like our maternal and infant death being significantly reduced. So all over the Caribbean, we have other examples of that, where we've had women within our healthcare system breaking barriers and actually shining.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. I have a question for Councillor Benoit. And my question is, how do you balance the demands of political life with the commitment to service and advocacy? How do you balance the demands of political life with the commitment to service and advocacy?
Thank you for that question. Balancing political life and service organizations and advocacy can be quite challenging at times, but of course it is incredibly rewarding. And for me, outside of my political life and career and involvement in service organizations, I am also an entrepreneur, a wife, and mother, all of which are demanding roles, and there are major responsibilities. So for me, planning is key. Determining and identifying your priorities and setting goals. I have found myself, particularly since becoming involved in politics, doing research about different planning tools that could be used to help with planning your days, planning your week, as well as prioritizing the various things that you have to do. Time management is also one of the things that I am forced to do in terms to create that sort of balance. On a typical day, I may have meetings, both in my political life. I may have to see clients in my business. And of course, you have your wifely and motherly duties. So you have homework, you have to get the children ready to school, they have the extracurricular activities. So identifying that time and space to get everything done. So I utilize my phone. I have my calendar. So as soon as something comes in, sometimes I try to input it in my calendar on my phone or write it down in my diary. Also having different software to help you with that time management. I remember from time to time I am on the go, and I will use my phone and use the reminder and speak into the reminder. Remind me, Siri, remind me to do X, Y, and Z. So that time management helps a lot. Setting boundaries between or compartmentalizing the different areas of your life. So setting the boundaries between the political, the service organizations, and of course the family life. And making time for each aspect of that part of your life. So I recall recently, I am the president of my secondary school alumni. Annually, we graduate some 1,000 members at the end of their secondary school life. So we have quite a large alumni body. So I'm the president of the alumni of my secondary school, and I am the council in the Tobago House of Assembly. So 2 days ago, or last week, I think it was, I had a live for my political life. And the members in my alumni reached out and asked, how come you didn't share that you were doing this thing in our alumni executive chat. And I immediately indicated, well, what I was doing was political, and I would want to separate the political from the NGO or the alumni. So it's compartmentalizing and setting boundaries between the different organizations and responsibilities that I hold. Of course, having that support system and delegating responsibilities. We say in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think throughout the Caribbean, it takes a village to raise a child. So leaning on my support system, leaning on persons who can assist, leaning on family members, leaning on other colleagues, to help you in fulfilling your roles and responsibilities. No man is an island. I cannot do it alone. So leaning heavily on those around you for support, prioritizing self-care. Your mental health becomes, I don't want to say an issue, but your mental health is important. So prioritizing self-care, taking that time just to rejuvenate and to have that time for yourself is very important in balancing all the responsibilities that you have. So that's one thing I do. Sometimes I just go for a drive, for a drive in the country. Sometimes I decide that I want to go on the beach. Sometimes I have a glass of wine. Just sitting in my own presence helps me to come back to my center. Of course, pray. Pray, and that having that connection with the supreme being, whoever is your supreme being. Commitment to prayer also helps with forming the balance. And of course, there are so many other things. Being true to yourself, and keeping true to your values. Because a lot of times we can say that, politics has a morality of its own. So in your political life, you're one way, while in the other parts of your life, you're another way. And I would say staying true to yourself helps you as well helps me to form that balance. So those are some of the things that I do to create balance. And again, it is not easy, it is challenging, but I love what I do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Thank you very much. I see that Dr. King has a contribution. Dr. King, go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So Simon, you asked that question to Ms. Benoit, and I said, I swear, Simon, Kimon, sorry. I swear she wanted to ask me that question. Well, I wear a political hat, and nowhere to interfere or anything with the response of my colleague here, but I think politics is service, and I don't give it a separation. As a matter of fact, I think being involved in politics puts you in this position to help serve. And I think that is part of the reason that I have become so active in JCI, because being the Minister for Youth, I was responsible for them, and I was able to identify all the service youth groups that, and especially gender groups as well, like business and professional women that were doing so much. And I thought, as the minister, I could contribute and I could help strengthen them. So I see politics as a life of service that you are actually at a point. And I told people that I'm a doctor, I care for people, but at a political level, you are able to care even more, because now you can actually be contributing to policies, and policies that can help transform lives. And with International Women's Day coming up, I am so happy that this year the government can boast of the many laws that we have passed to help women. And one of them is the Maintenance Act. And I'm not talking about the Maintenance of Children Act, which is a different act. But the Maintenance Act helps where we talk about gender-based violence. And sometimes it's not only physical, it can be economical as well. So sometimes you have a woman, and it can be a man too, but most of the time it is a woman sharing a life with a man, and all of a sudden he doesn't want her to work. He's taking care of everything, but he decides he separates from her, and now she's all on her own. How is she supposed to support herself? And the Maintenance Act talks to that. And being the Minister for Gender Affairs, I am very proud that I was able to contribute in that way to help that act get to where it is today. So it's service, it's politics, you just incorporate everything. That's how I feel on this end.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Mrs. Benoit, you would like to say something else on that topic before we move forward?
Yes, certainly. I don't disagree with Dr. King. However, sometimes it's based on your local political landscape as well. I think you have to manage the dynamics of the interaction as well as the merging of the political life and the social life. So for me, that works for me, keeping them separate. And I agree that they are all service, but that is how I create my balance. So I think is your local political landscape also lends in how you create that balance and how you integrate and merge the various aspects of your life to create that balance.
I agree with that. Now, I had asked Miss Merita Hyacinth to help me with the questions from the audience. We have members of JCI and others joining us. And so I'd like to open the floor. I do have other questions that I can ask, of course, but I'd like to open the floor in case anyone has a question for any one of our panelists. Remember, we are discussing tonight on trailblazers and caretakers, celebrating Caribbean women's contributions and help. And we have with us this evening Dr. Tamika Peart, Professor Vereen Shepherd, Dr. Addis King, and Councillor Petal Benoit. So I pause now to allow Merita to look through our participants list to see if we have any questions from the floor. Merita?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. So we invite any questions, and we see that we have one question from EVP Fire Lander of JCI Dominica. You may go ahead, Mr. Lander.
Thank you very much. I want to say good evening to all the wonderful women trailblazers who are here this evening. Trailblazers in your own right, of course, who have shared their experiences and information this evening. My question, of course, is for Tamika, Dr. Peart. And it relates to one of the comments you made with regards to the inclusion of men and boys with regards to this entire conversation. Because too often we understand when we're talking about gender equity and gender equality, the conversation tends to drift towards a unilateral one or singular gender approach. My question to you is how exactly or what approach can be taken by either governments or institutions or even non-government organizations like JCI that can seek to bridge this gap between the two genders to allow for this inclusion that we're talking about? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Lando. I will give my disclaimer that my experience is squarely with government, particularly working in the gender machinery of the government of Jamaica. I can tell you that the role of government in these things concerns setting the policy making agenda where those things are concerned. And hear me out for me to give the context to that. So we've had this issue in Jamaica where women have their gendered issues, their gendered realities that we have to respond to. And over the years, we've had a women's bureau. But we've realized too that men also have their gendered realities, and we have to respond to these gendered realities in a separate way. And just adding to what was said earlier, this is why politics, and when politics is done in the right way, in responding to the development needs of a particular space, you can get that conversation and you can start the responses. One of what was done in 2016 in Jamaica was to change the gender machinery from the Women's Bureau to the Bureau of Gender Affairs. And I don't have to get into the whole conversation concerning the sociology of linguistics and, you know, why language is important, but by the government changing the Bureau of Women's Affairs to the Bureau of Gender Affairs, it signaled that how gender was approached, it was now going to be approached in a way that looks at the needs of men and a way that looks at the needs of women. Again, to where government is also important, as stated earlier, concerns the policy making process. One of the recommendations of the national gender policy in Jamaica was that you would have, well, the national gender policy and the changes that were made to the corporate governance framework within the country. You need to have a minimum of 30% of any one gender being represented, or any one sex being represented on a board at a national level, or any one of the boards that fall under the government of Jamaica. Again, these are important signals that are being sent to the country that we are doing gender in a different way. We are now responding to what we are seeing on the ground, that we need to actively engage our men in a very methodical way. So changing the bureau from the Bureau of Women's Affairs, and then looking at the corporate governance framework, then now resurrecting the male desk that was at the Bureau and then wasn't at the Bureau, but then came back at the Bureau of Gender Affairs. That saw a whole line of activities coming out of the gender machinery of the country. So we have now moved from just having a regular national helpline that responds to the general public. We have a national helpline that responds to the needs of women, and we have a helpline that responds to the needs of men in the country. So it's a very, again, I have to go back and pull on what Prof would have said earlier. A lot of these things, when we approach them, we have to look at where we made mistakes in the past to inform how we're going to move on in the future. But a lot of the narratives that we have about how we engage men in the whole gender discourse, it requires that all of us that are sitting at the table change our perspective on how we think that men are going to come to the table and how we should respond to men when they come to the table. There is always the need for us to ensure that we work with our partners in the communities. And again, that's also one of what the government of Jamaica has been doing through the Bureau of Gender Affairs. You actually have a male a network of men's rights advocates, and they're always actively discussing how to include the younger men, the younger men at the high school levels, the college levels into the conversation of how to be a part of the discussion surrounding gender-based violence, how it is that gender-based violence also impact men outside of being the perpetrators of this. How does it actively impact them in a continued way? So as said, the role of government has to be grounded in data. It has to be grounded in very strong methodologies that are in line with what has been seen in other countries, and tailoring it to fit your reality. I can't speak about all of the Caribbean countries concerning how they have approached this, but that has been how we have approached it in Jamaica. And I can say that for this period coming up now for Women's History Month and Women's Day celebration, it will also be a period where we actively have our men coming on board with us, celebrating with us, because the conversation does not have to be one that is grounded in division. Gender inequality hurts men in the same way that it hurts women. It's just that we have to understand how the hurt that affects women, there is also a hurt, in for want of a better term, that affects our men. And we have to all be willing to collaborate and come to the table in a way that conceives that we have to try something new.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burt.
Are there any more questions from the floor, Ms. Hyacinth?
I'm looking. And so far, none online.
All right. So I would like to ask another question to Prof. Shepherd. Prof, in terms of reparations, I'd like to ask, what steps do you believe are necessary to address the historical injustices that have impacted the health outcomes for women in the Caribbean? So you were very specific tonight in mentioning sexual abuse and some of the health disorders that have come as a result of that. But I just want to broaden it up a bit. So in terms of reparations, what steps do you believe are necessary to address the historical injustices that have impacted health outcomes for women in the Caribbean?
Thank you. So there are two dimensions of health that I think have been impacted because of the past, because of historical injustices. Mental health, and that's why we are calling for psychological rehabilitation as part of the reparatory justice demand. And also of course, our physical access to quality health services across gender lines. But before I even go there, if we're going to fix the legacies of historical injustices, we need to know what those injustices are. And if we don't study history, we are not going to know what to fix. And I am appealing to the educators, to the ministries of education, the various governments, to ensure that we understand the past. If you don't understand your past, you're lost. You don't have any roadmap to guide you. Marcus Garvey said it. Nelson Mandela said it. We all quote these wonderful people, but we don't live by them. And as a historian, I know that we continue to be impacted by classism, by racism, by the pigmentocracy, which is manifested in, of course, also they're intersecting across race and class. And we pretend we don't have racism in a region that, oh, it's classism. But we know it's the same coin, just another side. We have to look at gender-based violence and the roots of that historically, and we have to try to eliminate that from our society. We have to ensure that it's not just the humanities people who study history. There's this snobbishness in our disciplines, even at the university level, Lawyers must know history for the region in which they are practicing. Medical people must know history. How on earth you're going to know what are some of the lifestyle diseases inherited from the past? Engineers. So all our professionals must study history. So you know what to fix. We are to tell our children that they're beautiful. There's this thing about, blackness is lower down on the scale. We must stop it. And you may say that doesn't happen today. I am here to tell you it does happen today. And we have to also guard against hegemonic masculinity and the inequities in the workplace, which cause anguish to women. We want equal pay for equal work, and we want to ensure that we don't carry on the narrative, him love me so him beat me. And in terms of growing up our children, you must have discipline. There's too much violence in our society, and a lot of our people are suffering from mental illnesses. So part of the reparation demand is, so we have two types of reparation: the internal reparation, what we can fix ourselves, and then the external claim to the governments and people who created the system from which, we have inherited these neuroses and these, these negative attitudes. We want more access for women to health facilities, and we want training in terms of psychologists and other medical practitioners to focus more on the things that affect women, so that the appropriate medicine, the appropriate treatment can be there. And I want to also mention that the CARICOM 10-point plan, which is the blueprint for the demand, includes attention to the public health crisis, because we know that at emancipation, we didn't get any compensation to help to fix our society and to advance ourselves. And at independence, there was no reparation, even though Caribbean leaders asked for this. So the 5th point on the 10-point plan is attention to the public health crisis. We know that we have some lifestyle diseases that are inherited from the past, diabetes and hypertension, because of the diet, and there's intergenerational transmission. The psychologists and the doctors tell me of some of these tendencies to have these diseases, so that we need to recognize and we need to demand a fix for these by expanding access and having more in terms of the social infrastructure. And number 8 on the plan is psychological rehabilitation. Too many people are walking around as sick as anything because of low self-esteem and because of it's still hanging around our necks, these attitudes of the past. So that's what I would say, in terms of this issue.
Thank you very much for that. Merita, if there are no questions from the floor, I have one for Dr. King. Is there anyone who has? Oh, Dr. Piat, you'd like to make a contribution?
Yes, just Dr. Joseph, going back to the question Mr. Lander asked earlier regarding the how do you get that uptick in more men coming on in the whole matter of gender equality within the Caribbean region. So I spoke about the institutional, strengthening the institutional capacity based on what Jamaica has done. And I never went into it fully in that we started off with the male help desk, but we then moved on to the male empowerment unit. So it's not even a year old as yet, but we now actually have a unit that is dedicated to the special situation of men and boys in Jamaica. So just putting it out there that that's a part of our journey, and that's a part of the growth of Jamaica as a country in terms of using gender as a critical tool for development.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peart. And so I have a question for Dr. King. Dr. King, considering the challenges faced by the health sector throughout the Caribbean, how can the contributions of women be leveraged to address the challenges that we are facing in our health sectors? So we all know that we have health sector issues in the Caribbean. How can contributions of women be leveraged to address some of these challenges? Would you like me to repeat? Okay.
No,
there you are.
sorry, I was trying to, sorry, I just had a little technical difficulty here trying to unmute. Yes, we do have a lot of challenges within our healthcare, and a lot of it is based on perception. Perception. We hear a lot of things, people are not well educated, and I think that as women, especially those involved in the healthcare, we can help shape the education of our population to help. For example, I will use Dominica as an example. Dominica has a lot of primary healthcare services around island, and they are free, and anybody can walk into any health center, and there are lots of health centers. But for some strange reason, the narrative is out there is that you will get better healthcare as a private doctor. So somebody might decide that although I am suffering from this and that, I don't have the money to see a doctor. But there are doctors all across the island in health centers, and you don't need money to see them. So we have to educate our population. And I want to go back to what the professor had to say. I think historically, we have suffered so much as Caribbean people, and it goes back to slavery, that we are told things that we put in our mind. So trying to educate the population becomes a very difficult process. So we are more prone, for example, Black people are more prone to sickle cell disease. And yet we have people having children and they do not test them to find out whether they have the trait. And then sometimes later when they started showing illness, then, or if they have the disease, then sometimes it's full blown and they will stay home and they will use traditional medicines. And don't get me wrong, I think natural and traditional medicines are great. We need to be educated about them and how to use them properly. So it goes back to education. So for us to curb these challenges, we have first to educate our population so we get rid of that perception that the challenges are worse than even. And then we need policymakers to put things in place for better access for our people. Because I talk about Dominica where we have the access and we don't even use it, but there are still countries where women has no access. There's also the part where, depending on your age, you have no access to sexual and reproductive health. So in this age, where we say adults is 18, yet you can have sex at 16, it's okay, but you cannot see a doctor without your parents before 18. So how do you put policies in there that if there's a legal sexual active age, then you should be legally be able to look and be able to access health care, especially sexual and reproductive health care at that age. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. I see that we have a question in the chat. I was just about to wrap up, but I will certainly take this one, and that is from Charlene White Christian, and she says that she has a question for Professor Shepherd. And she says, comparing women of the 19th century and those of today, what are your thoughts on the importance given to women in modern society? She says, do you think that Black women are given their rightful place in our Caribbean society? So Dr. Shepherd, she's comparing women of the 19th century to those of today, and she's asking, what are your thoughts on the importance given to women in modern societies, do you think that Black women are given their rightful place in our Caribbean society today?
Thank you for the question and thanks for engaging. Listen, all Caribbean women have come a far way since the 19th century. We have more rights, we have more freedoms, and especially in the way we dress, because we're not all of us, some of us are still, but not all of us, the majority of us are not bound by the Victorian gender order. In the 19th century, there was a Victorian gender order, even coming into early 20th century. But I think through the women's movement, through the attention we pay to women, especially every year around March, through education, women have more access to education, and we don't have the barriers in terms of the job areas. You know, women must be confined to the domestic sphere. Women can be breadwinners. All of these 19th century attitudes, I think, have been addressed in one way or the other. However, what I see creeping or lingering, is what I call the pigmentocracy. Now, under slavery, there was a colored scheme, which we call the pigmentocracy. That is the whiter you are in shade, in skin color, the higher up on the social scale you are, and in terms of politics and so on. And at the bottom was the Black person. And going up, you had Sambo and mulatto, and then after mulatto, you have octoroon, quintroon, and all of that. There is still a lingering view that anything Black no good. And we have to work hard to eliminate that. As I say, it's not dominant, I don't think, in most of our societies. But if it lingers, it means that those 19th century attitudes are still attaching themselves to us, and we must liberate ourselves from it. One of the worrying tendencies I see creeping back, well, certainly in Jamaica, I don't know about the other Caribbean countries, and Tamika can correct me if she sees improvement in this, but as I look around some of the schools, now, when I went to school, my skirt, the skirt in the uniform was just at the knee or just above. And we didn't feel threatened. Nothing, we walk on the road and blah, blah, blah. No, you can say that was then, and things are more dangerous now. However, what I see in many of the Jamaican schools, the girls' skirts are down to their ankles in many of our schools. And I do not know why this is so. When you talk to some of the teachers, they say, oh, it's to prevent, them having relationship with boys or boys peeking and blah, blah, blah. Now, you tell me that is going to prevent that sort of behavior? Why are you oppressing our girls with that, going back to the 19th century Victorian dress code? So I object to that. I speak out about that, and I don't know if it's happening. And then in the schools, we are creeping back to a time when Black hairstyles are not accepted by schools. There was a time Black hairstyles were not accepted in banks and front offices. That's changing. I remember when I had Bantu knots and I went into a bank and one of the Black women tellers said, I wish I could wear my hair like that, but we're not allowed. Many of those attitudes are changing. Rasta hairstyles are, Bantu knots and dread as a hairstyle. That's accepted across our region, I think. But in the schools, Rasta children are their hair being cut off, or they're being sent home. Boys can wear the faded hairstyle. And I don't know why we have become dress police once more. So, yes, we have come a long way. Yes, I think that Black people have rights and Black women are not as oppressed as we used to be. But we do have a lingering idea about skin shadism, and we still have an attitude to black boys, Black hairstyles, and we still have a little Victorian gender order in the way we're telling our girls to dress. And I just can't understand the backwardness of that.
Thank you very much, Professor Shepherd. I certainly agree with a lot of what you said, and I thank Charlene for that question. So tonight has been a very, very wonderful one for me. I've enjoyed myself totally, and I thank the JCI for inviting me to be the moderator. Tonight, in our discussion on trailblazers and caretakers, celebrating Caribbean women's contributions and health, we have heard presentations from Dr. Tamika Peart, and she spoke about the overview of the impact of public policy on health, focusing on women's contribution. We also heard from Professor Vereen Shepherd, who spoke on the historical context of women's resistance and their role in health and reparations. Thirdly, we heard from Dr. Addis King, who spoke on direct contributions of women in the health sector and current health initiatives led by women. And fourthly, we had Councillor Petal Benoit, who spoke on political dimensions of Caribbean women's contributions, balancing political life and service organizations. It is not my job to give the vote of thanks, but I would like to thank these four wonderful women for their presentations this evening and for engaging with me and members of the audience as we asked questions and you gave wonderful responses. Thank you so much. I now hand back now to the JCI. You have Ms. Lindell Felix, who is serving as our chair, and she will take it from here. I've had a wonderful time, and thank you so much, JCI, for inviting me to be the moderator this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kimon, for such a great job. We really appreciate it. I must say tonight that the panelists delivered valuable information with great enthusiasm. I will now call on EVP Leisha Samuel to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please allow me to adopt the protocols previously established. So good evening. It's my honor to do the vote of thanks tonight. Of course, with our chair lady, Executive Assistant Lyndon Felix, for introducing us and getting us started and primed for this evening. And I'd like to thank NCs Shauna, Therese, and Wanaka, and of course, Executive Assistant Laurel Jonas for leading us in the opening exercises for tonight. I'd like to thank IVP Cheryl, as well as National President Marita, for warmly welcoming us tonight, getting us ready to be engaged and to receive all the information that we will receive tonight. So thank you guys for welcoming us. And of course, I'd like to thank Executive Assistant Hoya for introducing our lovely moderator tonight, Dr. Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for leading us amply through this tonight and leading it smoothly, making sure everything flowed and really engaging in our panelists and us to make sure we had a fruitful session tonight. I'd like to thank our panelists. So we'll start with Dr. Peart. Thank you so much for being here tonight, for sharing all that information, that history of various persons across the region, not only English speaking, but French, Spanish, and in Suriname as well. And instilling us the value of including boys and men in our fight, in this whole fight for gender, and making sure our policies are aligned and policymakers are targeting everyone. I'd like to thank Professor Shepherd tonight for a very engaging session in terms of making sure that we know our history, because we need to know it to go forward, and for engaging us and letting us know in the past how women have resisted and sacrificed a lot, so they were not part of the problem in our history in terms of infanticide and the importance of midwives. And we really value that and how that should be considered in terms of reparations. And that is why it should be valued in today's society. And we should pass it on to the youth so they fully understand and appreciate where we come from to know where we're going in the future. And I'd like to thank Dr. Addis King for leading us and really talking about the initiatives, talking about how non-communicable disease is really a factor in our Caribbean lives today, and how we as women in a matriarchal society should take the charge in terms of our diets, exercise, and of course, managing our stress, and being sure to be aware of, ways that we can relax and decompress and make sure that we're all well-rounded and can deal with everything. And finally, Councillor Benoit, thank you for sharing with us the history of women within the Caribbean, inspiring us to do better, to improve, hopefully, our numbers in the political arena and advocacy, as well as the importance of balancing all the hats that we as women sometimes wear: wife, mother, entrepreneur, political leader, NGO leader, all of these things, how we should balance, and time management is key for that. So thank you for sharing that. I'd also like to recognize and thank the Honorable Melissa Papoon Skerritt for being here tonight with us. Thank you for being here, as well as BBN TV for carrying us live tonight. And finally, of course, I would like to thank you, the audience, for being here tonight, for receiving the information, for engaging. And I know you grasped something tonight that was valuable. And I'm wishing everyone a happy International Women's Day when it comes around tomorrow. And I hope you reflect on what was shared tonight and hopefully implement some of it in your lives. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you very much, EVP, for the vote of thanks. And now I would call on our Public Relations Officer, Laurel Jonas.
Good evening, everyone. Let's just take a photo to show that we were here at this interesting and exciting session. So if you don't mind, let me see those lovely smiles. Turn on the camera. And we do a photo op. Say cheese. Hold 1 minute. Let me see those lovely smiles. We're going to take one more. Such a lovely smile.
Thank you very much, EA Laurel. So we have come to the end of this great panel discussion. I just want to thank everyone for coming on. It was a pleasure. And I would like to say good evening. And it was also a pleasure being the host for this evening. Thanks all.